And going live. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first of our series, Mental Health and Thriving. I'm so excited to have our guest speaker on tonight, Dr. Daniela De Fazio, who's a clinical psychologist and a neuropsychologist. Hopefully I've got that right. And she's
psychologist, yep.
And the co-founder of Launching Psychology, which is a practice in Essendon in Melbourne. And we're here tonight to talk about mental health and wellbeing, particularly at the moment. We're thinking of all of our Melburnian colleagues. So welcome, Danielle.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. And before we start, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting tonight, which is the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to elders, both past, present and future. So Daniela and I have been organising this event for a little while now, and it was really we've talked about this prior to COVID, hadn't we? But COVID really spurred us on.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that with COVID, it's kind of got lots of people having the opportunity and the time perhaps to get onto those things that they've had on the back burner for a long time. So I think it's been a really good opportunity to do some different things, that's for sure.
And can you tell us a little bit about Launch Psychology before we get into how we came about doing this?
Yeah, sure. So I'm co-director of Launch. So my business partner, Brooke, is a colleague of mine that I've known for a long time, and we decided to join forces a couple of years ago. And so we've set up a practice and a co-working space in Essendon where we welcome members who are psychologists and other allied health professionals to work in our space to create a bit of a community. And our practice is really focused on wellbeing and positive psychology. So we sort of look at helping people manage their life day to day and also help them get to where they want to be. So so we have a number of different practitioners that work with us, and we have a range of different skills, and we also have a few neuropsychologists that are in our practice. So quite wide-ranging skills, which is great.
And I have to say, coming to your CoSpace was beautiful. It's such a lovely location and makes you feel really warm, homely when you walk in there, and it's really friendly, nice environment. So
thank you.
You've done a wonderful job of setting that up.
Thank you. Yeah, well, it's a really important part of what we wanted to work towards, and I guess creating a great space for our clients to come into, but also a space for people working in psychology and allied health to have a community of like-minded people to work with. So pre-COVID, it was working really well, and then of course there's been a bit of a spanner in the works there, but we'll get back. So
well, I'm glad that we could at least kickstart this series. And for people that are watching and wondering why we're just talking about general mental health and well-being, for those that are dyslexic, we are at higher rates of anxiety and depression, and at higher risk of attempted suicide. So I thought it was really important that we started this series to talk just in general about mental health and well-being. I've always talked a lot about my mental health experiences and the need to be seeing a psychologist quite regularly to just check in and to get that extra support. So at the moment, what do you think are some of the key challenges that you've been seeing coming through the clinic since COVID?
It's been really varied, actually. So, it depends on how it's really impacted people and their individual circumstances. So I guess, we have people who have really relished in the slower pace of life and have quite enjoyed just being still for a little bit, and, enjoying, I guess, getting onto things that perhaps they usually don't have time to do. But then there's obviously more vulnerable people and people that have obviously been significantly affected. I think there's a general collective increase in anxiety amongst all of us, really, because there's been so much uncertainty and things change sometimes not only week to week, but sometimes even every 24 hours. And so we're really kept on our toes at the moment, aren't we? In terms of keeping up with changes and having to adapt to what that means for us and our families day to day. And that anxiety could be really contagious too. So, we're watching the news a lot, and we're hearing about COVID all the time, and that's all people seem to be talking about sometimes. So certainly that heightened increase in worry, and what does the future mean, and what are things going to look like not only next week but in a few months' time and 6 months' time. So that's certainly something that people are struggling with. I think there's also a general sense of overload. Of course, we know people homeschooling their children, plus trying to work or run businesses, financial pressures. So there's I think a general increased load in what people are carrying too. And then obviously people that have been significantly affected with job losses, people that are already vulnerable, isolation, loneliness. So the list can go on and on, really. And I think it's really important to recognise that we're sort of in the same storm, but people are affected quite differently. But I think certainly the anxiety around uncertainty is quite prominent at the moment.
Yeah, I have to say that we had a girls catch up on the weekend, and I think we were on the line for nearly an hour and a half, and for the majority of that it was talking about COVID, and in the end I was exhausted. I said to them at the end, can we talk about something else next time?
Yes.
So that we're not just focused on that, because it was really draining when we got off the line. That's all we'd spoken about.
Yeah, and it can actually be quite psychologically tiring to over talk about something as well. And so I think one of the strategies that we've talked about in terms of well-being is to get off the news at times. Is get the information that you need, go to sources that are reputable and that have the facts, but then limit your time and get your fix of good news stories as well. I think it's very easy to focus on obviously the significant number of tragedies and events that have happened this year that seems endless at the moment, but I think making sure that you're sort of spending time with the good news stuff as well can be a really good strategy.
And how do you think, what are some things that might be helpful for people to focus on the good? Because at the moment when people say, what are you doing for the weekend, we're all saying pretty much the same thing. And and there is only so much Netflix you can watch or stand. So have there been any strategies you've been talking to your clients around ways that could help them focus on some other things?
Yeah, I think one of the really important things here is that a lot of our self-care strategies that we typically use are no longer available, and they're not doable at the moment. So I think one of the really nice things to be able to do is to do a bit of an inventory around your self-care practices and what do they look like, typically, but also looking at that list saying, okay, well, these are particular ones are not doable at the moment. What can I add in that's a little bit different? And then finding that new sort of self-care plan, I guess. And, that could be as simple as having a walk every day, or buying a coffee from your local cafe, spending a little bit of time in nature. They don't have to be big scale sort of time consuming things, but things that become your non-negotiables, and then really looking at your plan for the week and making sure that you're scheduling those sorts of things in. Because I think so much of what we usually do is being taken away from us that it can be hard to think about adding new things in if you're not spending the time doing that. And so it can be very easy to go, well, I'm not looking forward to anything at the moment. So one of the ways to also manage the uncertainty and the anxiety is to bring it back to day by day and check in with yourself and look at what's not working, what can you add in to your day that perhaps will boost your mood, and what are the things that you can let go of. And if people need inspiration around adding things into their self-care plan, thinking about ways that you can connect to other people. We always know that connecting with others is a really important way to boost our mood and to keep our well-being high. Obviously at the moment we've got much more limited opportunities to do that, but we also have some really innovative ways to do that too. So obviously the getting on FaceTimes, and you said you had a girls group catch up and those sorts of things, and another really, really important one is moving your body. We know that physical exercise obviously is really important for us, but the combination of getting outside and being in nature and doing that is actually really good for our brains and really good for our routine and our well-being in general. So I guess creating some new routines around self-care and looking at what's no longer doable and what are some of the things that you can add in.
And it's really interesting you say being outside and doing that exercise, because before COVID, I was really good at seeing my personal trainer twice a week. I was walking home from work, which was 6 kilometres a day. And then when all of that stopped, I looked at my phone one day and realised I was doing less than 500 steps. I was like, oh my gosh, how is that possible? And so really now making a goal of at least trying to do 6,000 steps a day at a minimum. And not always good at it, but at least it's kind of a focus. And in our house, we have a bit of a competition of who's done the most steps. But it's hard to get into a routine.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think what you just highlighted there is partnering up with someone and teaming up. You know, those sorts of things are really good strategies to help keep you accountable and to help you set it up as more of a routine. And, you know, it definitely is not easy for things to drop off our radar. You know, when life gets busy normally and when we need these things the most, they tend to drop off. But at the moment, there's you know, so much of what we usually do that has just dropped off because it's out of our control. So rather than just letting that stand, having a look at really putting that plan in place. And, you know, one thing that you just highlighted, which is really interesting too, is that we're really good at planning for our physical activity during the week. So, you know that you do personal training a couple of times a week and that you walk to work. And so, you know, when we typically ask people, well, what does your physical plan for the week, wellbeing plan for the week look like? They're pretty good at being able to tell us. Whether they're actually doing it or not is a different story, but we usually know what things we should be doing to keep our physical fitness up. But when we tend to ask people what their wellbeing plan looks like, people are usually a lot less sure. So this is about really looking at our mental health and wellbeing in a really similar way that we look at our physical health and wellbeing, and planning for it during the week as well, actually adding these things in to our diaries and planning them out for the week. And it turns out that we're probably doing a lot of these things already, but it's just about taking note when you're doing them and taking note of how they're making you feel.
And so what are some of the things prior to COVID that people might have put into a self-care plan, or what are some things that, because it's not often you hear about a self-care plan in this kind of context around mental health and well-being. And so for some people it might be a new term that they haven't really heard about or really thought about before. So what would that look like prior to COVID, or even now, some things that you might put into a self-care plan?
Yeah, well, it's a really good question. And I think one of the things to remember here about a self-care plan too is that it is about looking at it in the equivalent way that you do your physical health. So again, having that in a mindset, but also recognizing that when you have this kind of plan in place, this is exactly the sort of thing that buffers us against mental illness and, you know, helps us not eliminate the difficult times in our life, but when those things do pop up, that we can navigate them a little bit easier, you know, and tend to not, I guess, suffer in those circumstances as much. So there's a really nice framework that exists around wellbeing, and it's called the 5 Ways to Wellbeing. And so if people want inspiration around what to include in a self-care plan, this is a really nice framework to have in mind. So the 5 Ways to Wellbeing focuses on, number 1, connecting to people. So again, looking at how we spend our time with our nearest and dearest, our friends, our family, but also about how we connect to our community. And I guess one of the things that's really dropped off at the moment, that, you know, people are just not connecting to each other out in the community, obviously, as much because we can't and we're socially distant. But, you know, it's even when you're walking past someone, saying good morning to them. It could be chatting to the person that's making your coffee when you go to purchase a coffee. You know, when you're doing those sorts of things, you're not only putting some fuel in your tank, but you're also doing that for that other person potentially as well. So this is not about necessarily adding lots of things to your day, but also finding the opportunities in the things that you're already doing. So pre-COVID, so many opportunities to do that. You know, it could be just saying hello to your neighbour, or, you know, making sure that you're connecting to someone in your workplace. You know, calling that friend that you've been thinking about for weeks but haven't really jumped on the phone. It can be even as simple as texting. It doesn't have to necessarily be catch-ups and, you know, physical get-togethers, because sometimes that's not possible in the usual way that we operate day to day. So connecting, definitely an important one, and particularly with the rise of loneliness in Australia and around the world, that's a really, really important one to keep in mind. The second one is to move your body. So number 2, way to wellbeing. You know, again, we know the benefits of exercise, but you know, finding ways that you energize you. You know, so it doesn't have to be slogging it out at the gym if that's not your thing. You know, finding ways that you can move your body that are energizing and that you enjoy. The other one that we really focus on a lot in terms of the psychological tool is to stop, pause, notice, tune in, using mindfulness practices to, you know, bring your attention back to the here and now. And that's a really powerful skill to manage all of the things that our mind tells us, and to really manage all the worries that we have and all the things that we sort of dwell on. So, you know, they're really important skills to be able to learn and use day to day as a tool. The other one is to learn. You know, we know that learning is good for us. It's good for our brains. It keeps us, you know, it keeps us bright, and it keeps us motivated. It keeps us curious. So, you know, it could be reading that book that someone's recommended that you've always had on your list, or, you know, Googling something that you've wondered about, asking somebody a question, just basically getting curious and learning something new. It doesn't have to be, you know, enrolling in a course or doing anything overly time consuming. And the last one that we know that's really important is to give. So we know that, you know, extending kindness to other people, but also to ourselves, is the bee's knees really for our mental health. And this is, I guess, one of the things that we're finding is really coming to the forefront at the moment during the whole COVID pandemic. So it's an important thing that I think probably gets dropped off a fair bit when we're busy day to day, but at the moment it's probably one of the things that people have become a little bit more conscious of, I think, and finding ways to check in.
And I found that just through the foundation, our call to action around if people wanted to volunteer or to lend a hand if they had a bit of downtime. And we've had quite a few people coming through offering to do bits and pieces, which has just been fantastic, because it really helps us, and it helps to grow the community. So it's interesting that 5th one is around giving.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I actually heard a story today from somebody too who mentioned that they work in sales, and that their sales are around raffle tickets to raise money for charity. And they just thought that their business would just completely go downhill through the COVID pandemic, but apparently it's just boomed. So in a time where you think people don't have that extra to spend, they actually are. And it's probably because it's one of the things that they can control, and one of the things that we know make us feel really good. We get a boost out of knowing that we've done something for somebody else. So, you know, pre-COVID, there's so many ways that we can do that. During COVID, it's really about checking in on each other, checking in on your neighbours, you know, offering services to somebody if you can. You know, obviously the restrictions make that a little bit trickier. It could be writing a thank you note to somebody and sending that off in the mail. You know, so simple things that don't have to take a huge amount of time, and things that you can adjust as life adjusts as well, because when we're super busy, we don't have time necessarily to volunteer or to throw our weight behind a charity, or, you know, those more time consuming things. But there are things that we can do day to day. And in fact, there's a really great resource through Action for Happiness. And what they do is they put out a calendar every month. And this month is Altruistic August. And so every day of the month, there's a tip on something that you could do that's in service of somebody else. So they're, you know, really great resources to learn how to keep this simple without thinking too big. Because really, when life is back to normal, most of us don't want to know that we have to be adding things into our day. So things that we can do that form part of our usual routine and that we're doing as part of our usual routine are usually more sustainable. And what you'll notice is that the things that I've talked about, they're not difficult. You know, they're pretty obvious things that when you think about it, you go, yeah, of course those things make me feel good. The problem is that we drop them off because we get busy, we get overwhelmed, and we're not consistent. And so, you know, this is where getting support from a psychologist can be really helpful too. If you feel like you need some help to know how to put these sorts of things into practice, that's exactly what a psychologist can help you out with and teach you more of those tools.
And I think it's also just important you know, that people, it's okay that we're not coping, or it's okay that we're feeling overwhelmed or anxious. I mean, this week for me, it's just, and I don't think it's that we've gone into stage 4, but I think just feeling overwhelmed trying to get everything done and get uni done. And then, you know, it's, yeah, it's important for people to know that they can reach out, and especially now that there's the extra 10 sessions on top of the mental health plan, which is fantastic for people.
Yeah.
Because it can be quite a costly exercise if you don't have access to that mental health plan.
Sure, absolutely. And I think, you know, now more than ever, the opportunity to access support is enormous. You know, there's lots of online platforms, e-health is becoming really prominent, you know, and yeah, as you said, there's much more sessions under a mental health care plan that people can access through their GP. And most psychologists are doing telehealth at the moment, which means you can be sitting in your bed or on your lounge, you know, in your lounge room, and you don't have to take that time out necessarily to get to an appointment and fit it into your day. And you know, psychology can be very much about practical skills, learning tools. The things that I just spoke to you about are the things that I teach my clients to implement in their day-to-day routine. And we know that the science tells us that those things work.
And some of those resources we'll be able to put up on the website under this video that we've recorded tonight. And we'll be having our second one next month around tools and tips, which will be fantastic to kind of grow what we started tonight. But we've been talking, you know, my circle of friends around, you know, is there a possibility that we've become so insular and so used to being inside and not having that human contact anymore, that we might struggle to come out of this and to reconnect in a way?
Yeah, I think it's interesting actually to think about what it's going to be like when we sort of start coming out of this. And I think, you know, I've stopped and thought about it too and thought, gosh, you know, people are almost going to forget how to interact and, you know, how to be around each other again. So I think it's going to be different for everybody, isn't it? You know, and again, I think that's even a more important reason to be on top of these sort of tools and strategies even now, so that you're maintaining those contacts with people and you're maintaining those relationships and those friendships, so that, you know, it's just a kind of a smooth transition as we come back out of it. And, you know, hopefully, you know, with life returning to some kind of normal, it means that people have really potentially used this opportunity to really tune in to what works for them and what doesn't work for them, and to know what bits they need to add in. You know, I know even personally for myself that there's been times where, you know, there's been so much on socially that even though they're really fun and great activities, they can still be psychologically tiring. So I think even that lesson in itself is, you know, this has been a great opportunity to be able to learn about yourself in terms of what bits of life, you know, you've kind of been able to let go of and be okay with.
Yeah, and whether it will come out of it saying it's okay to say no sometimes. It's okay to go to every party or every sporting event, or that sometimes it's okay to just stay at home, even though that's the last thing. Hopefully by summer we're not staying at home anymore.
That's right. I know. It's going to be really hard. And it's probably going to be such a gradual transition too, that it won't just be, right, you're allowed to do everything again. So it'll probably be bits and pieces.
It was really odd going to the supermarket today, one person out of the house, but just looking around at everyone with their face masks, and we're so used to smiling as that kind of connection. And I was talking to my sister about it. She said, well, just start saying hello. And I said, yeah. So when I go for my walk now, I make sure I just say hello as I'm walking past. But it was just such a surreal thing looking around at all these people with masks. And you just thought, are we in, is this our world? Like, it was just such a weird, weird vibe.
It's very surreal, and I think it makes it a lot easier to disconnect, doesn't it? You know, I found even before we had to wear masks that even going for a walk, you know, I kind of, for me, I'm a very social person, so, you know, I don't have any trouble walking past someone and saying hello to them. So I kind of made that a point for myself. And, you know, and some people like would barely give you any eye contact, and others that, you know, oh yeah, good morning. So you get different reactions from different people. But now with the masks, I find that it's even further detached. So I think I read somewhere, you know, that we need to come up with some different signs of connecting to people. So either like giving a thumbs up, or, you know, I even walked into, exactly. I've even walked into my local coffee shop and you know, said to them, I am smiling at you, you know, just so that they sort of know that underneath the mask that there is someone, you know, expressing kindness and, you know, giving them a smile and saying hello. So yeah, I think it probably now takes just that little bit more effort, doesn't it? Because otherwise it is much easier to just kind of put your head down and do what you have to do and go back home.
Yeah, but and I think in a way, like before, like I always said hello to the coffee shop person, or you know, when you go in. But now I've made an extra conscious effort to say, you know, not be looking at my phone. How's your day going? You know, we're thinking of you all, or just, you know, things that I wouldn't normally have done previously. Just making sure, you know, those people that are still working and on the front line, that, you know, they know that we're thinking of them and that you know, we're making that effort now. So I guess it comes back to that giving that you were talking about before. And
yeah, exactly right. And, you know, so much of what you just spoke about there, you know, nails a couple of those ways to well-being, doesn't it? You know, like you're connecting and you're giving. And, you know, the other step in that is to really pause and notice how that's made you feel. Because what we don't do well is we don't really stop and notice when something has made us feel good or given us that boost. Particularly at the moment, we're kind of on alert all the time. We're on our brains are kind of on survival mode, looking for the next threat, really. And our brains naturally biologically have this negative bias. So we're not used to looking for the positive feelings. So, you know, when you've done one of these 5 ways to wellbeing, when you've, you know, been for a walk or you've connected to someone in a really great way, just kind of pause and notice, you know, how that feels in your body and your mind for, you know, 10, 20 or 30 seconds. And what that does is something really important to your brain in terms of connecting those parts of your brain that help us remain positive and optimistic. And I guess this is where the practice around gratitude also sort of fits in with that too, is that no matter how awful a situation or your day even might be, getting used to having a practice around at the end of the day, just taking note of something that went well for you that day or that you enjoyed that day. It could even be as simple as you had a really great coffee, you know, or somebody smiled at you and said hello, you know. So in any kind of situation, there is always something that you can find to be grateful for. And I think that's even more important at the moment because, again, what it does is it feeds that hope, optimistic type circuit in our brain, which we need.
Yes, we certainly do right now. And that's a lovely way to kind of wrap up our conversation. We've got a few people on the line. So if anyone wants to pop in a chat in the last few minutes before we wrap up, please feel free to ask Daniela any questions. But otherwise, we will be running this session next month. I will check the date as we're talking because I don't want to give the wrong date, which is something I sometimes do. But it's been great to just start to have these conversations.
Yeah, and I think it's important to recognise that, you know, they're not really complicated tips. It's just about bringing them to mind and making a plan for them. So, you know, if anyone, you know, is looking to take something away from this chat, I would encourage them to go away and make a bit of a list of their self-care activities and then put those into a plan for themselves for the week and use those 5 ways to wellbeing as inspiration to slot some things in and start small. And also notice what you're already doing because there's probably a lot.
Yeah, well, I've definitely started to get back into meditation again, which has been, I was doing it all the time. And then it just, once COVID started, it just dropped off. And then I started again. I think, it's like exercise. Why did I stop this when you realise how good you're feeling? We've had Laura say some great practical strategies to help with mental health, and we'll try to do the plan. So thank you for popping that in the chat box, Laura. Is it possible to put the 5 strategies up on the website with the video?
Yes, absolutely. Yep, I'll send you some resources. And in fact, there's a really great website called 5waystowellbeing.org.au. And so you can do lots of reading on there around the 5 ways to wellbeing, the science behind it. And there's also a great resource in there if you do a little bit of hunting called 100 Ways to Do the 5 Ways to Wellbeing. So again, if you need some inspiration on how to do any of those 5 things and what to add in, that's a really great resource.
Fantastic. Well, we'll add all that to the website. And then the next session's on mindfulness and tools on the 3rd of September for people that would like to come along and join us then. So thank you so much for your time tonight. It's been wonderful to see you online, because we
Thank
haven't
you.
seen
You
each other for
too.
quite a while now. So
I know.
Thank you for giving up your precious time. I think what I've learned
Pleasure.
is, time is such an important gift that people give. So have a lot of gratitude for the time you've given us tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. I was really looking forward to it.
Stay well, and
Thank
I
you.
look forward to speaking to you next month. Thank you for everyone that joined tonight.
Yeah,
And
thanks
please,
everyone.
head to dedyslexic.com for all those details. And also you can go to Launch Psychology if you'd like to find out more information about Daniela and the work that her and her wonderful team do. So until then, stay safe, look after yourselves. Remember to connect with us if you need to through Facebook, our 1-800 number, or send us an email. We're here for you if you need. And until we see you again, stay safe and bye for now.